Welcome to One Spark, an event for ideas. We believe ideas make impact, and we want to see a world full of inspiration and passion. This will be a live and a virtual gathering. It's for both budding and seasoned professionals. Our hope is that you leave challenged, maybe ignited, certainly inspired. We believe that ideas are critical and to be part of the world that we want to see. And one of the biggest things that we believe in is that a passion-filled idea can create inspiration, and it only takes one spark to create a wildfire. So for today, we'll have 5 speakers coming up. And the 5 speakers can talk about anything that they want. It can be one word or one phrase. We want passion and inspiration. Our goal is to infuse into the world more passion and inspiration. We have an opportunity to be part of the future that we want to see. And we think that it might start with one spark. So, I'm your host, Josh. I'm going to be transitioning our speakers on and off, but I wanted to tell you just a little bit about where One Spark came from. And as we're getting started, I want to make note of our logo, the asterisk, or spark, if you will. See, the essence of the spark, the asterisk, in an author, it allows you to include omitted content that might be relevant. And I love how our gifted and talented designer, Nico Mejia, he says this. He says, the overlaying sparks is the intersection and collaboration of ideas that might not be included in everyday talk or topic, but they might be critical to the bigger picture of life. That's the essence of One Spark. That's what we want to see, a shift in perspective. So I was trying to think about this for a second. Where did One Spark come from? And I was trying to put my finger on the exact moment or inspiration, and I was brought back to this poem that really is at the heart of it. It's always been with me, but in light of the last several years, it's the thing that sparked this idea. I may not look the part. I like poetry. I love poetry. I love stories and storytelling, and if you know me in my career, or even at a lunch table, I like to tell stories. So the idea is that as we tell stories and create ideas that matter, we get to infuse inspiration into this environment. So back to the poetry. The poetry piece, my favorite poem, is Birches by Robert Frost. Now, it's a rather long poem, so I'm not going to recite it. But what I love about it, it's about perspective. It's from an older gentleman looking back on his youth. And in the only way that Robert Frost can, he infuses this romantic perspective of days before. And what I love is he sees these trees, these birch trees, and he talks about how he was a climber of birches and how he would climb all the way to the top and bend them over and ride them down. And it is poetry. What I love is he's walking as an older man and he sees the same birch trees. And what stuck with me, and it has always stuck with me, is that he says, I once was a swinger of birches, and I prefer to believe that they were bent over by swingers of birches. And he goes on and he says, I know that I'm looking at these trees, and they're probably bent over and worn weary by snow and ice. And it's beautiful. And he says, but I would prefer to believe that some swinger of birches who rode them down to heaven's tops and enjoyed the ride is what's responsible. And he goes on to talk about how he doesn't want to grow weary of this pathless world and how earth is the place for love, and that he would prefer to believe that they are swingers of birches and that one could do worse than be a swinger of birches. That is about perspective. And my hope and my dream and my desire for us is that we're infused with perspective, and that you might see something that you see every day, and that because of One Spark, just perhaps you see something a little bit different, and that one spark might inspire something in you. Perspective, inspiration, ideas. This is a free sharing space to talk about passion and ideas. Not all of them will be relevant to your particular story, but they all are relevant to the bigger picture of life, as Nico says. What we want to see and what we want to be part of is that free sharing of ideas. And we want to share them with gusto. Our idea here is that our 5 speakers will have 10-minute talks, and then we will end with a Q&A. There'll be networking on both sides. So as we grow One Spark and as it comes down and we build upon what we're starting today, you'll be able to be included and meet with other ideators. So, who is ready for our first speaker? All right. Perfect. I have the honor to introduce to you Brittany Toms. Brittany Toms is the CEO and co-founder of SeeSparkGo. She elevates every meeting. She is an ideation machine. Her moxie is unmatched, and it's my honor to welcome to the stage Brittany Toms.
I'll take it, Josh. Moxie. Let's go. Hey, everybody. I'm Brittany Toms. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm really excited to be talking about something that is really important to me. Anybody who knows me, and especially if you work with me, you know that I have a deep-seated belief that enthusiasm wins the day, every day. And my goal after these next 10 minutes is to get you fired up. Have thought a lot about the question of enthusiasm and how it works, and can you cultivate it, and how do you maintain it, and where does it even come from? And I've witnessed the effects of enthusiasm. I live it out, and I've seen so many of you in this room live it out, and so many of our friends online. And we know that enthusiasm is seeing possibility and opportunity in everything that we do. Now, I realize that not everybody is a cheerleader, but the fact that we have cheerleaders should tell us something. There is an entire sport dedicated to getting you hyped up. This is a picture of my sister-in-law, Christina Dozier, and she cheered at Georgia. She's also a 1 on the Enneagram. She's super detail-oriented, very organized, a mother of 4 who homeschools. Her enthusiasm looks a lot different today than it did on the sports field. But sports are a natural place where we feel the freedom to be enthusiastic. Fandom exists because we have a natural interest in something or someone and a sense of belonging to a team. Being a fan of something means that you genuinely care about the outcome for that person or that group. In order to define a word or a brand, though, we all know this, it's also important to define what it is not. So what is enthusiasm not? I can tell you that I believe the opposite of enthusiasm is apathy. Apathy is a lack of interest. It is an absence of excitement or care, like we just talked about. And as a manager of people or as a mother, it's hard to motivate someone who is genuinely not interested in their performance, who is genuinely not concerned about their work ethic or their results. And if you cannot discover what motivates a person, then it would be incredibly difficult to lead that person or the people around you. Enthusiasm is also not mediocrity. For a lot of people, this is motivating. They challenge themselves and others to set a bar of expectation high. I will not accept mediocrity. My father-in-law says people rise to the expectation that they have of themselves. And so, what about negativity? We see a lot of negativity in the world that we live in. And having enthusiasm doesn't necessarily mean that you put on rose-colored glasses and suddenly everyone around you is nice. Wouldn't that be great? But unfortunately, all we have to do is turn on the media, turn on the news, or scroll through social media, and we can see that there is negativity in our world. And so we have to channel the inputs that we take in order to live out of enthusiasm. There is a way to combat that, though. Peace out, negativity. Like anything, there's a spectrum of enthusiasm. On one hand, you have hyper, busting at the seams, full of energy, and on the other hand, you have apathy and mediocrity and lack of care, lack of concern. And so the key is finding this balance of letting life hit you Life is not easy. The world is not perfect. And so you let that hit you, and then you choose to see that something good can come out of everything. So let's start cultivating some enthusiasm. Start with gratitude. What are you grateful for? I was searching for images of gratitude like anyone does before they're going to give a talk. I kept finding pictures of people holding their heart. And I thought, how interesting that even in an image bank search, that the word gratitude has a very physical expression to it. What do you hold dear in your heart? When we focus on what we're grateful for, we change our mindset. We have a little saying at SeeSparkGo, if you're not excited, you're not invited. And I say that to everybody, and it's true. Our mindset is one of gratitude when we walk into a room, when we enter a conversation, when we look someone in the eye, and we're grateful to be there. We're genuinely grateful for the opportunity to serve them. And so, I want everyone to look up. Be grateful. I challenge you to start a gratitude journal tonight if you don't already have one, and write down 3 things that you're grateful for every day before your head hits the pillow. And I guarantee you, you will see your countenance lift. That is one of the first ways that we create gratitude. The next thing is that we have to fill our belief. We have to fill our buckets with belief. Who doesn't like a picture of a smiling baby and a guitar? Now that you've basked in that cuteness, consider this. The joy of childlike wonder is worth pursuing as an adult. The joy of childlike wonder is worth pursuing as an adult. The potential for greatness, for creativity, for anything is possible mindset happens when we put ourselves in environments that fill our belief. Have you ever been in a conference not to know what the person said or leave remembering all of the content that was delivered, but to remember how you felt? And how you make a person feel is more important about you than anything else. It's incredibly important also to get outside of our normal routine, or as some folks say, to get a 30,000-foot view of something and understand what is possible. And then believe, like my friend Jeff Schinneberger says, that better is possible. We possess the very power and ability to create our future. We are anything but ordinary, and that is rare. The root word of enthusiasm is entheos, which means God within. And so when we operate in our God-given talents and abilities, we are acting in the image of our Creator. And that is the coolest part about showing up in our day-to-day lives. Speaking of showing up, one of my favorite business principles is this: you must be present to win. The first step in anything is always showing up, whether it's a family reunion, whether it's your first day on the job, whether it's a stage that you get to speak on, whether it's a group project or a new business pitch. Your presence matters. You being here today, you showing up online today matters. Enthusiasm is how you show up with your whole self. It's how you bring your best and your brightest ideas to the table. And we all have them. Your unique gifts, your unique strengths and abilities. It is how you fight to stay true to your purpose. And it always, always, always creates more opportunity. So lastly, if we're going to let enthusiasm do its thing, we have to get our hands dirty. Whatever task is before you, I guarantee you'll do it better if you enjoy it more. When your hands are dirty, it means you're working toward something. You're working toward a goal. Strengths-based leadership, something I'm really passionate about, tells you that a strength is not only something that you're good at, it's something that you enjoy as well. So often when our hands are dirty, our faces are smiling. And sometimes you have to get your hands in the sand to experience the thrill of exhilaration that comes from getting your hands dirty. The thrill of doing is actually where the magic happens. If our friends at Nike have taught us anything, it's this: just do it. You've got to get out there and get your hands dirty and experience the thrill of doing so. So you have the gratitude that you need to fuel you. You have the belief that winning is possible, the purpose and presence that comes with showing up. And now it's time to get after it. If I've learned anything from sitting in hundreds, if not thousands, I tried to calculate last night, of brand strategy sessions, brand strategy meetings, brainstorming sessions, we like to call them spark sessions, it's this: enthusiasm is attractive, and we are what we attract. Good things are coming. The future depends on what you do today. Thank you. Get fired up.
All right. I want to start with gratitude right now. I love that phrase that people may remember what you say and even what you present, but they will most certainly remember how you made them feel. So as we transition to speakers, it's my great honor, and I am grateful to bring to the stage Jordan Price. He is the Director of Operations for Gibbs Capital. Jordan comes to us also as a college and student pastor for Passion City Church and Mountain Life Church in Park City, Utah. We can't wait for what you have to say. Jordan, come to the stage. Thank you, sir.
What's up, everybody? I'm going to move this out of the way right here. You know, it's dangerous when you let a pastor have a microphone. We can get going for a minute. Hey, I'm really honored to be with you guys this morning. You guys have a special culture, and sometimes it takes somebody coming from the outside in to see that it's special and help you remember that it's really special. So I just want to say, you're blessed to be here right now. Somebody made you coffee. They put your little name tag on the table, and you've got some snacks over there. So it's awesome. You've got it good. Cheer up. Be enthusiastic. There's a lot to be excited about. Brittany, Andy, thank you so much for having me. Josh, way to go, facilitating all of this. This is such a special thing that you guys are doing. But particularly, one of my favorite parts of this morning is that I get to be in the room with my wife, Francesca Price. Say hey. Love you. It's great to be with you guys this morning. I'm excited to share with you this morning around the idea of cultivating a lifestyle of generosity. You don't have to be, all you have to be is a Google expert in typing this in to learn really quickly that there are tons of benefits to being a generous person. First and foremost, generous people tend to be healthier people. They actually have lower blood pressure statistically. They actually live longer, have a longer life expectancy. And check this out. Wouldn't we all want this? They actually have lower stress levels. And there's a lot to say about what that is and what's actually going on in the brain, but it's really simple. It's just the idea of living open-handed. Not holding on, not being clenched fists, but actually releasing the blessings that we have in our lives and sending them out into the world around us. The third thing that I would go as far as to say is that people that are generous and that have a generous lifestyle, they enjoy the favor, they enjoy the benefit of having people around them that are for them. When you are open-handed, when you are living your life ready to give, not just receive, people you'll find are going to be for you. They want to champion you. They want to push you forward. They want to see you succeed. But there's a couple of challenges here, right? First of all, our first challenge is that we live in a unique time. We live in a culture that is hyper individualistic. I know that that's a big word, but we have concentrated our minds and our hearts on what we can consume rather than what we can contribute. It's all about what experience are we going to have? When is the next vacation we're going to have? When is the next meal or going out to dinner that we're going to be able to experience? What is the next post that we're going to be able to consume? And we get so indoctrinated with this idea of I need to get more and more and more for me. That culture has kind of created this system that we do that. And then secondly, we have our nature. And in our DNA, you don't have to be a psychologist. You just need to spend some time with a 2-year-old to know that our nature is to keep things to ourselves. Come and spend a few hours with our little one, Leo, and his cousins, and they're scratching each other, they're clawing, they're fighting over toys that they haven't played with in years. Have you ever seen this? And they all are continually saying, mine, mine, mine. And we call this the meeting of the Minosaurs. These little guys will do anything that they can to take hold of what they want. And while it doesn't just end when they're kids, right? We might mature emotionally as adults, but we still tend to fight this same thing. We want to hoard things close to us. In self-preservation, we want to keep things to ourselves and not share them with other people. So how do we actually cultivate this lifestyle of generosity when there's a culture around us that's telling us to consume and there's something within us that is saying, keep things to yourself? How do we actually cultivate this lifestyle of generosity? Well, there's an ancient principle called the principle of the seed. And it's really simple. It just goes like this. The generous sower reaps a generous crop. The stingy sower reaps a stingy crop. And, we don't live in an agrarian society, but it's a simple idea. We've all been given some seed, and these are some kernels from some corn. Some of us have been given more. Some of us have been given less. But here's the reality. We all have the option to choose how, when, and where we're going to sow those seed. And for most of us, when we think about the harvest that we're going to reap, right, that we plant the seed and we expect there to be a crop. We expect there to be fruit on the other side of this return. But here's the thing that's interesting. I don't know if anybody in here is, farming their own vegetables, but this is the power of the principle of the seed, is that when you harvest the fruit or when you harvest the crop, you get more seed. Okay? So here's where it becomes a compounding effect. You started with this, but you're ending with this. Now you have the opportunity to take the bigger thing that you've been entrusted with and to sow even more generously. And so the farmer knows that he's not just planting for the crop that he's going to get, but for the seed that he's going to get also and have the opportunity to sow more. So this is what I want you to think about with this principle of the seed, is that generosity, like the seed, like planting the crop, could be the avenue of which your next opportunity is going to come. When you sow seed, you plant that seed, there's a harvest. The harvest is going to create your next opportunity to grow and to be generous. It's compounding in nature. You might be listening to this, you might be thinking, Jordan, hey man, it's 2022, inflation is going through the roof, the supply chain is backed up terribly. This is not really the season of my life to be generous financially. And part of that is a too narrow of a view. And for me, I've thought this way for years, that generosity primarily involved finances. But I want to tell you that there is the opportunity in your life to be generous in all things. All of us in our day-to-day lives have an abundance of opportunity to show generosity to other people. Let me clue you into a few that you might be overstepping. The first is that we all have the opportunity to be generous with our time. We all have time on our hands that we can decide who we're going to give it to, how we're going to use it. You can easily invite the new guy or the new girl to go to coffee with you, right? You can give that 20 minutes so easily, 30 minutes so easily to that person. You can send that email after that meeting to your coworker and say, oh my gosh, you led so well in that meeting. I just want to take 30 seconds and gas you up. That's what the kids say when they want to fire each other up. They want to gas you up. You can gas them up. It costs you so little to send that 2-sentence email after that. Go even a little step further. Take the time to write a handwritten note. These are all forms of generosity that cost you so little, but will go so far in the eyes of other people. Check this out. We all have the opportunity to be generous with information. I've seen this as I've stepped out of ministry and into full-time construction and real estate. What I'm amazed by is how generous people are with information in the construction industry. My plumber wants to tell me who the best electrician is. Now think about, why does he want to share this with me? Because he wants me to win so that when I get another opportunity, can use my plumber again. I'm going, my plumber is for me. My plumber is making sure I get the best electrician. Therefore, I know that my plumber is going to do a good job. All of you guys in here are business professionals. You're professionals in your field, and you have the opportunity to be generous with your skill set, with the knowledge that you have. There's younger people on your team and in your life that you can sow information into their lives, and there will be a return on the backside of your investment by sharing that information with them. We all in our daily lives have the opportunity to be generous with our kindness and be merciful to people. Think about this for just a second. Let's be quick to forgive. Let's be slow to hold bitterness towards, or better yet, let's not hold on to bitterness at all. There's generosity in forgiving quickly. Check this out. I think a lot about this idea of cultivating a gentle tone, whether that's in your verbal, your everyday language with people, or even if it's in a text message or email. We could all raise our hands here, and we probably got an email yesterday that didn't have a good tone, right? Somebody did in here. But we can all grow in this, and we can show dignity to others through the way that we share kindness. I got one idea and one image that I want to leave you guys with. A few years ago, Francesca and I had the opportunity pre-pandemic to go to Israel. And it's such an amazing, amazing place. There's like nothing like it on the planet. So many diverse landscapes, but one of the interesting things about this part of the world and about Israel is that they have a sea at the northern part of the country called the Sea of Galilee. And this is where Jesus did a lot of his ministry, and you can see it's a lush, it's a green area, it's surrounded by mountains, it's absolutely gorgeous. Little Bible trivia right here. Does anybody know the body of water that connects the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea? Hello, the Jordan River. You guys need to go to Sunday school. Just kidding. So the Jordan River connects the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea is completely different. It's dry, it's barren, and there's nothing actually living in the Dead Sea. And why is that? Because there's no outlet. Everything just flows into the Dead Sea, and it stops, and all the minerals build up, and it's become so salty that nothing can actually live in that body of water. And so here's the idea that I want you to remember, is that healthy things have overflow. Healthy things, healthy organizations, healthy people have overflow, and they're directing that into other people, into other businesses. We're not just being filled up, but we're actually pouring out. You're not just a consumer, but you're a contributor. And here's the interesting part of generosity. I'm closing up. You will only know if this is true if you put it to practice. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more. The talk spoke right to me. I love the idea of generosity and that it's all around us and we have opportunity all the time. Our next speaker is one with a generous heart herself. I've known her for almost a decade. She's one of my favorite people on the planet. She has a huge heart to serve, to make people laugh. She has a wealth of knowledge for the nonprofit and ministry space. She is a marketing communications professional. And if you follow her on Instagram, she will fill your feed with soundtrack-inspired cooking dishes. Let's welcome Janae Boyer to the stage.
Thanks, Josh, for shaving some numbers off my age. I've known you for 12 years. Also, Jordan, you have a future in nonprofit fundraising. Just think about it. Let's get started. Today, I want to ask you a question. Marketing, what we do 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, let's be real, a lot more than that. Is it a tool for good or evil? My boy Dilbert, the original Office influencer, thinks that it may be a little bit trivial. It's just liquor and guessing. Actually had this poster gifted to me by a non-marketer early in my career. Says that we are all style and no substance. Jokes aside, some people think we might be downright nefarious. A 2021 Gallup poll of folks in the United States said that marketers and advertisers were the number 3 most distrusted profession. We are right behind members of Congress and car salesmen. That's gross. And you see headlines like this every day. Are we really tearing at the fabric of society with bad images and misinformation? Is PR inherently unethical? Are we a dark PR firm? Guys, I am stressed. I'm stressed. So what are we? The creator of Adobe Photoshop, John Knoll, says any tool can be used for good or bad. It's really the ethics of those using it. We know this to be true across multiple areas of life. Alcohol can create community. It can be a way to celebrate. It can be a way to enjoy good food. It can also straight up ruin your life. A car can be for upward economic mobility, can take you on an adventure with your friends, or you could be a street racer on ATL Scooped. Even something as fun as magic. In the hands of the boy who lived, it's a blockbuster book and movie franchise. In the hands of a ghoul with no nose, well, you all know how that ends. So let's look at this. What is our tool being used for? Let's talk about body image. I'm stressed just thinking about it. You guys, I grew up in the early 2000s in the age of Britney Spears and Paris Hilton and controversial Abercrombie ads, the Mean Girls era. And while I would like to think that feeling uniquely bad about yourself was something that happened to my generation, the truth is the advertising industry has been making us feel like garbage for a long time. They made our mothers feel like garbage by saying that's no shape for a girl, which is rude because that's a nice pair. They made our grandmothers think that they could wash away fat in years of age with Lamar-reducing soap. You go to today, dimples cute on your face, not on your thighs, that's rude. And if I had perfect proportions like this photoshopped lady's here, my hand would be here-ish. But don't I look so slender? This ethos was really summarized by the former Abercrombie CEO, Mike Jeffries. He said, those companies that are in trouble are trying to get everybody, young and old, fat and skinny, but then you become totally vanilla. You don't alienate anybody, but you don't excite anybody either. That guy sounds like a fun hang. Enter 2004, the Dove Real Beauty campaign. While no one ad campaign can change the world, this was the start of a trend. They used their PR agency, Edelman, we know people who work there, to commission a study, a research study of more than 10,000 women in 8 countries. They found a few things. Fewer than 2% of women identified themselves as beautiful or similar words. More than 60% of women said that their bodies were too big. Here's something. 8 out of 10 adolescent girls will not pursue something they are passionate about if they don't feel good about the way they look. Then you look at the eating disorder statistics. 9% of Americans have an eating disorder. 1 in every 4 Americans with an eating disorder will attempt suicide. This is serious. Their intentions weren't completely noble. They did want to make a profit. But they turned the beauty industry on its head by showing things that were old, things that were different, things that were flawed, things that were shapely, and said, could this be beautiful? And the numbers showed it. Their sales grew by 12% in year one, 10% in year two. A decade later, their profits had increased by 62%. And they backed this up with partnerships with nonprofits that supported body image and supported inclusion. Fast forward to 2022, Aerie is beating out Victoria's Secret with their diverse and inclusive bodies. Victoria's Secret has completely rebranded. Brands like Target are taking the inclusivity to a whole new level, showing not just all sizes and shapes, but all ability levels, because seeing yourself matters. And miracle of all miracles, Barbie has hips. My 9-year-old niece has never once played with a Barbie doll that she couldn't grow up to look like. That is a win. Now let's talk about the big ghouls of the advertising industry, tobacco marketers. They have the notorious distinction of having preyed upon just about every single demographic in the world in the name of a profit. You're a man, you want to be rugged and manly like the Marlboro Man. You're a kid, well, we're just gonna smoke with a cartoon. You're a woman, well, we all know you look bad, so smoke a Lucky Strike instead of a meal. Sure, that's healthy. Philip Morris, one of the biggest tobacco CEOs of the 20th century, was quoted as saying, "Today's teenager is tomorrow's potential regular customer, and the overwhelming majority of smokers first begin to smoke while they're still in their teens." He didn't say this before the Surgeon General's warning. He said this in the 1980s. Some of us in this room were alive then. My grandmother died of advanced stage COPD because she started smoking when she was 14. Philip Morris, he can just go blank. Enter the late 90s, and we have lots of large liability lawsuits against big tobacco, trying to reduce smoking and share about the dangers. The Truth Initiative was one of many public awareness campaigns that used advertising to drive down the rates of youth smoking. They decreased youth smoking rate from 23% in 2000 to just 4% in 2020. They had programs to help people stop smoking. 20 years after they started, there are 4 times more college campuses in the US that are completely smoke-free. There are countries that are about to be post-tobacco. Joe Camel is gone. Some of you have never been to a restaurant where you remember being asked about a smoking section. Back to my 9-year-old niece, she's never gonna flip through a magazine and see a cigarette ad. That's because of advertising. Then we have an example that is near and dear to my heart with social media. Is it ruining the world? Maybe. It may be a little toxic. It may put us in a dangerous spiral. I think Mark Zuckerberg was the Antichrist, but if those Left Behind movies told me anything, it's that he'll be just a little bit hot, so we're still waiting. But Tristan Harris, a design ethicist, says if you're an app, how do you keep people hooked? Turn yourself into a slot machine. They're trying to do something big and bad. But social media can also do things that are big and good. I'm going to take you to 5 years ago to the Me Too movement. What you may not know about it is that the Me Too movement did not start with Harvey Weinstein and some hashtags. The Me Too movement started 10 years earlier with a small regional nonprofit like many of the ones that are on our client roster. This woman, Tarana Burke, was looking for some messaging for her caseworkers and for her donors and for our volunteers to empathize with and connect with girls who had gone through horrific things. She was faced with one girl's particularly harrowing story, and she said, I wanted to show empathy, but I didn't know what to say, and so I just said, me too. And it became a rallying cry for her organization, Just Be Incorporated, for more than 10 years. Fast forward to 2017, you have many high-profile cases in the news gaining steam, and an actress takes Tarana's words and she retweets them. 2.3 million tweets in 85 countries later, 24 million Facebook posts, and it is the single most viral social media campaign in history. And this spurred change as well. Everything from legislation to conversations about the pay gap. And we all know it's real if they put it on the cover of Time magazine. This was marketing. So back to the question. We as marketers, are we good or are we evil? We're neither. We're a tool.
Only Janae Boyer can get away with calling an entire audience and live stream a tool and it be inspiring. I'm reminded of this phrase of meet me in the middle. No, not the old Diamond Rio song about Georgia, which is a great one. I believe it's referenced most notably in Martin Luther King's letters from a jail in Birmingham. And so he talks about taking a step towards the middle from whatever perspective or position or party you have. But in the middle, you're shot at from both sides. I think it's a good place to be. Let's all take a step in the middle. Thank you, Janae. Our next speaker is Kim Landrum. She is a senior lecturer in the Grady School of Journalism at the University of Georgia. Your national championship Georgia Bulldogs. What you may not know about Kim also, and I didn't brief her on this, but she put it in her bio to me, is that she has origins similar to mine. She got started at the loveliest village on the plains, at Auburn University. War Eagle. All right. Seriously, we are really grateful to have Kim join us. She has a wealth of knowledge in design, marketing, and communications. Put your hands together for Kim Landrum.
All right, good morning. I thought I was the last speaker, and I'm the fourth, so nothing like feeling unprepared. And I cannot take credit for that national championship. But I'm happy to be a representative of UGA and Grady College, and as Josh said, I am a professor in advertising and public relations at Grady, so that will be helpful in today's talk. It's funny how things work out. They said you can talk about anything you want, and just days before I spoke with Josh and Nico about presenting here today, I had something occur in one of my creative classes. So I was working with some students in an intro graphics course, and their project was Photoshop assignment, and it started with some self-portraits. I said, go out and take some photographs of yourself, and then in Photoshop, I just want you to play. I just want you to go in 3 different directions with your self-portraits, and just let the magic of Photoshop kind of take over, and just have fun, play, don't have any expectations. And I could see pretty quickly that some of them were stifled. They didn't really know how to handle a project that didn't have a finish line or didn't have a really defined ask, because how many of your college professors just say, go play, right? And it had probably been a minute since a lot of them have played, because let's be real, from the time they were in kindergarten, we've told them to sit in this chair and then get in this line so that we can go to the lunchroom. And then when you're in middle and high school, you got to take these classes so that you can get into this college and have this major and then have this career. And so everything has felt really formulaic for them up until this point. So when someone tells you to play, I get how that feels stifling. So I didn't really give you a sign, but you got it. Okay. So anyway, I started thinking about this because I take my work home with me, like we all do, and I thought it was really sad, because I feel like I have been blessed with a really broad, experiential, multifaceted, multidimensional, whatever you want to call it, life. And that has at times felt like whiplash, because I'm all over the place. You can go to the next one. But what do I mean by multidimensional? Well, I think we all have hobbies. I think we all have things that we dabble in, and I'll call these minor curiosities, just things we do to unwind. We do them, we like to cook or whatever, and that's good. But again, I would call these minor curiosities. And as I really started thinking about, well, how does curiosity play a role in my life? You can go to the next one. I really dug into this, and it was really interesting and fun, but more difficult than I thought that it would be. And it didn't initially look like this, but eventually I ended up in these 4 buckets. And it is chronological from left to right, as much as I could make a list chronological, but left to right, top to bottom. This is sort of a snapshot of 53 years on this planet. And I hope that if I were to come back in 5 years or 10 years, this list would look very different. And maybe it would say something like, she learned how to play the cello and she's speaking Italian fluently. But currently, those things are not on the list. Anyhow, this was really interesting to me because I started to see a lot of crossover between things like, how does wellness play into how I conduct my classes, or how does faith influence how I coach, or all of these things. And so it becomes this really intricate fabric, right? And again, this list does not make me special. This list is an indication of the blessings in my life. So I'll just say that, okay? It's just an acknowledgement of the blessings that have been shared with me. But I want to focus on brain health because this is something that, and again, these things, when I say kind of a deep dive, these are rabbit holes, these are things that I've really spent, not just, again, minor curiosities, these are things that I've spent years of my life learning. And brain health is something that directly correlates to curiosity. So you can go on to the next one. There are some very specific and direct benefits and correlations between curiosity and brain health. So the hippocampus, okay, when you are curious, that is going to activate the hippocampus. That's that control center in your brain that's responsible for behavior and learning and emotions. And this is important that you take care of it and that you really nurture that part of your brain, because as you age, going forward, and again, this is something, I'm midlife, so I'm thinking about this, right? The latest statistics on Alzheimer's, 6 million people in the US are fighting Alzheimer's. 2/3 of those are women, okay? So you can bet that matters to me. And when we think about curiosity and we look at curious people, when we look at the traits of curious people, we see some things. They tend to be more at peace. They're well-rounded. They're good critical thinkers. They're adaptable. They're flexible. They tend to have stronger relationships. And so these are things that you should think about when you start thinking about, well, gosh, am I curious? Do I even have time for curiosity? All right, let's go. I'm never going to nail 10 minutes, but... So back to the students, I feel like I have been fortunate to live this very curious life. And I don't know whether that's because I was naturally curious, so I gravitated towards a career in creative, or because I'm a creative that allows me to live a curious life. But, whatever, I think we could all benefit from kind of stopping and thinking about, all right, well, how does curiosity play a role in my everyday life? I think a lot of times we don't take the time to be curious because we're so used to immediacy, right? We're fed an ad, we've bought it, and then it's going to arrive in 2 days. And so this idea of going down a rabbit hole and kind of broaching the subject that maybe you don't know a lot about, we just don't like that, okay? Let's go on to the next one. I think the other thing is that we equate fear and failure with each other, and goodness knows we don't want to fail at anything, right? That would be the worst. And the way I see failure is just accelerated learning. I think the quicker you screw up, then the faster you're going to be able to adapt. So hey, I love failure, and I tell my students that all the time, like fail all the time. It's accelerated learning, and I think if we could really change our perception of failure, then that's going to free us up to be a little bit more curious, right? To take those chances. we'll keep going. All right, so let's just say you feel like your life, maybe it lacks dimension, or maybe in your adult life, you're not making time, you're not committed to curiosity. How can you work that into what you're doing now and moving forward? The first thing I would say is have fun and enjoy the process, because if you're not interested in it, you're not going to stick with it. And life is short and we're busy, so do something that you really enjoy. So pursue the passions. Maybe they're not your side hustle, maybe they don't provide an income, but if they bring joy to your life, then that's added value. The other thing, pace yourself. Anything that is skills-based, whether it's a new language, anything that's a tangible skill, it is going to take a while to master. So just let that unfold naturally. Again, I know that we feel like we live in this accelerated pace, but slow down and just let these skills develop over time. The last thing is just be aware. It's so easy for us to spend our lives looking at our phones and just getting sucked into all the negativity. And I think if you look at your day, think about all of the things that you might be missing, all the wonder and awe in the world that might be passing you by simply because you're not being aware. And I think opening yourself up to those opportunities is going to naturally invite curiosity into your life. I think that's it. I cannot believe it. 19 seconds. Woo! I'm so proud.
Thank you, Kim. That was incredible. I love that. The idea, we have an internal Slack channel called Failing Forward. And I realized that I made a fail forward as one of our leaders. I created that channel at like 10:30 at night one night on a weeknight. And as one of our team members said, you never love seeing a new Slack channel and a post from one of the vice presidents of the organization that says Failing Forward. Perspective, right? So blind spot noted. Our next speaker is none other than Callie Young. She is a social media strategist. She is a connoisseur of style. She is a hunter of vintage home goods. She has a contagious calm and an overwhelming joy. Callie Young, one of my favorite people. Welcome her to the stage.
Okay. I now have to figure out, there we go. Okay, so my word today is a curator. And when you think about a curator, you might think of a super pristine museum like this with white walls. Maybe it's an exhibit of a single artist. You might go to a collection of works like we've got here, a variety of artists, maybe all on one theme or an inspiration point, maybe a year. But today I'd like to talk about what's my favorite kind of curator, which is an everyday curator. And so this here is from an artist gallery in my hometown, Columbus, Georgia. The artist is Bo Bartlett. And here you can see we've got some works that maybe look like they're of value, and then there's some things here that we're just assuming they have value because they're on this artist's wall, and you're like, that must be like his paint palette from like the first piece he ever made. Like that must be really, really important. It also might just be a random one. We don't know. And so that's what, this idea that just because it's on the wall, it's in this space, we're assumed to give it value and to really respect it and kind of understand the story that's being told here. And that is, kind of what we can do in our own everyday lives, really show respect to these items, even though they mean nothing, like the random things I have hung on my wall if you've ever been to my apartment. Same kind of thing. And so this account is one of my favorites. We're not looking at a Spot the Difference series here, but if you can pick out all the changes, I will applaud you. This is one of my favorite accounts. It's Coco Elected. She calls herself a hoarder. I'd call her a collector or a curator. And what I love about this account and what I always take away from it is really the freedom that comes from just curating a space and just using what you love in this space. So most of these pieces are probably not from the same collection. They're not from the same artist. They may be from a thrift store. They may be from really anywhere at all. And they're just kind of all in this space together. And because your eye doesn't really have anywhere to rest, you're kind of just seeing it all together. each of these pieces kind of give each other more value in the fact that they're all there together. And so from the outside, it might look like a hoarder. I'm sure she gets some Instagram comments from people who say you need to clean up. Like, that is too much for me. In the world of minimalists and Joanna Gaines, this might not be their flavor. But she understands the value, and she's able to pair it in a way that I think, for me at least, this is my favorite room, and I would love to live here, kind of gives each of them more space, and more space to hold value and to kind of be in there together and in that space and work all together collaboratively. And I think there are a lot of things in life that are meant to be collected this way. And I think one of the main ones is ideas. And I think that so often, at least in my own world, it's really easy to hold on to one thing and feel like that's the space it's supposed to go, and that's who I am, and it's got to stay where it is. But here, this space really changes over time. It stays malleable. Things fluctuate, and maybe they go to a different space. Maybe she decides this doesn't serve me anymore and gets rid of it. And that is kind of the beauty of collection. I think another aspect here that always speaks to me is just this idea of collecting is never really a finished product. This room will probably change 100 more times. Also, I pulled these 3 pictures from the last year. So it is literally always changing and always growing, and I'm sure that space will never actually be complete. But if all we do is kind of take in new things and never let anything go, that is what most people would call a hoarder. And so this quote is from one of my favorite authors. You'll see him in here a few times. Hoarders collect indiscriminately, artists collect discriminately. And so it's really that understanding that the collector here understands the value and understands where it needs to go and why they're holding on to it, and lets go of the things that no longer serve them. I try to do the same thing. If you follow me on Facebook, you might see that I have 5 stars on Facebook Marketplace. Please go follow me and purchase my vintage home goods. Things that no longer serve you, you can get rid of them, and it's okay. And you don't have to hold on to them forever, because otherwise you would be a hoarder. And that is not the way that we want to hold on to really anything in life, whether it's ideas or whatever it may be. So one of my favorite writers, calls himself a writer who draws here, is Austin Kleon. And this is a series that he calls Newspaper Blackouts, where he takes a newspaper or a magazine and blacks out all the words that he no longer wants to see to create a poem. I have the one on the left in my apartment. It's called The Titanic. So these pieces, he actually has a TED Talk going on about these, essentially going through how he started creating these and got a lot of feedback. Your ideas actually aren't new. There's a lot of people who have done this before, and we're saying, you're copying. And went on to write a book that's really great called Steal Like an Artist. That's all about this idea of taking what works from you from other artists and pulling it into your own work and kind of creating your own unique family tree of art and ideas. And so that's really the whole point, is that great artists are thieves. And that's an example of this here, and taking that existing idea and giving it new meaning and life. And I think we get so much more out of life when we think about ideas and our perspective and our personalities that way, that we have the opportunity to change and grow and to pull an inspiration from a lot of sources, and to not, hold on to anything too tightly. If you knew me when I was 16, I just thought that Audrey Hepburn was everything and all I needed to be, and I really boxed myself in that way. You might actually not be that surprised to know that today. I feel like it's still deep within me. But I did it in a way that wasn't healthy, really boxing myself in to say or even another, any other kind of personality, would they do that? If they wouldn't do that, then I don't want to do that. And so that can really box you in a way that's not healthy. I think it's important to have inspiration points and, people you want to aspire to and things that you're going after, but to not make it your end goal and the final point and, to kind of put yourself in a box. There's that idea of kind of curating and collecting different perspectives that I think is really, really valuable. I am a major goal setter. If you know me, you know this. I love a list. I love a to-do list. I love to know where we're going. Where are we going next? Okay, let's go. But I'm not a big fan of the 5 and the 10-year plans, because I think having an idea of where you want to go and an inspiration point and kind of letting yourself grow along the way is so much more valuable. Because again, 16-year-old me would not think that I am where I am today. And that's a good thing. I think that I've grown in a way that's, made me better. And then a lot of that is that ability to just be flexible with who I am and who I'm becoming. I'll end with my favorite type of art to make, which I think kind of sums this all up, is collage art, because you're really taking something and deconstructing it and then making it your own. And a lot of times I will hold on to something for a long time. I was a subscriber to Darling magazine, like the first year they came out, and I still have all of them, but they're all cut up. And I've held on to them for a long time, and there's a lot of pieces that I started with, I tried to make something with, wasn't happy, threw it back in the box. And then over time, honestly, recently in the last year, have found a way to make them into something that I really love and have found a space for my home. This was a boat in the water. It is no longer that. And so chopping it up, making your own, taking it apart, finding the way that it works for you, realizing that just because you're not having that spark of creativity now doesn't mean you never will, but it's also okay if it's time to throw it in the trash. I love throwing things away. That is also a part of this. And so I think that kind of, this last piece that I'll leave you in is just this idea of it wasn't for me. And so we've got, this piece that we've created, and maybe the materials were for me at this time. And so that is just this idea of being okay with it's not for me anymore, or it's not for me at this time. So this is, again, from Austin Kleon. It's a phrase he uses when asked, did you love the movie? And he doesn't want to offend someone. He just says, it wasn't for me. Instead of saying, it was the worst, or I gave it 1 star. And so I think adding at the time is a really important modification here, especially for me. It's just, it wasn't for me at the time, because something that you would have never done 5 years ago, you might do in 10 years. Also, if you know me, I love John Mulaney. And he had a whole bit a few years ago about how he would say, we're never going to have kids. And they would say, never. And he'd say, I don't know. And now he has a baby. So times change, people. And so just not having those really definitive phrases in your life of never or always, to really just let yourself remain flexible and malleable. To kind of give yourself the grace, and I think also give other people the grace to change. It's really, really important that we let people become the best version of themselves, even if it's not who we think it was in the beginning. So give yourself the grace and the flexibility to hold on to ideas, to reassess them, to find the way they fit for you, to curate ways of thinking, to collect and grow every day. I have lived in my last apartment for 3-4 years. It was never done. I've realized nowhere I ever live will ever be done, because it's always a growing and finished product, collecting and changing. And so I think if you're always adding to your collection, the work will never be finished. Thank you. That's not my phone.
That's a great spark right there, Callie. If you're always adding to your collection, you'll never be finished. I love that. We're going to be transitioning to our Q&A session with the speakers. So just give us one moment as we set up the panel. How about a big round of applause for our wonderful speakers? We've had sparks about curiosity, generosity, collecting, enthusiasm, marketing, right? It's been a good talk. So one of the things that we want to start, part of the ethos of One Spark, is that we have a little bit of free sharing time. So Jordan, I'll start with you, and then I'll open this up to the group. We will pass the mics a little bit here. But you talked about generosity, and you talked about how you can't necessarily experience till you try it. I'd love to know what's something that our team or our viewers or anybody that sees this down the road could do to start living out of that. What's a practical tip? And then I'll open that up for anybody that wants to start.
Wow. I got on a little kick before I had kids of climbing some mountains, and some bigger mountains. And one of the things that you have to climb a mountain is that you have to have a guide. And so we all have the opportunity to be a guide for someone. And so I would say, and we have a culture maybe of people that are like moving aimlessly or haphazardly through life. I think all of us have the opportunity to be a guide for someone. And really the reality is that it's on the person that needs the guidance to go and find the guide in our culture. But I think that we can be generous and show generosity by, as the guide, going and finding the people that want to go where we are. And so that's one practical way that you can grow in that.
That's great. That's great. Anybody want to? Okay.
So good. Nobody else had any
I
comments.
love it. I love
Mic
it.
drop.
All right, so Callie, the next question is for you. You talked about being a collector over time. I want to ask you a question about how your perspective has changed, but you said something that it sparked something in me, and I'm dealing with it. You said you don't like 5 and 10 year plans. I love 5 and 10 year plans.
I honestly thought of you when I said that.
Yeah,
I was like, oh no.
It makes me think about this conversation I have with my beautiful bride, and I can't get us across town without GPS, but I can get us across country without a map. And my brain processes that way. I think bigger, longer in that picture. And it speaks to seasons and knowing yourself as well. And I love what you said about being a collector over time and kind of understanding that. Tell me how your perspective has grown over time.
Yeah, I think mostly losing the 5-year plan has been my perspective. But I'm still a goal setter, and I think still, I have meetings with my husband. Like, here's
Zoom
some goals
meetings?
I have. They're in person. I was trying to think of, what did he say? Oh, offline. Yeah, we went offline with that. But I think my perspective has changed in that having a loose, holding things loosely, essentially. I know where we want to go, but I'm not going to say, I will never do that, or I absolutely have to have this specific goal match, because I think even at SeeSparkGo, honestly, has taught me a lot about that. Just the role I have now didn't exist 5 years ago. And so knowing I have a direction that I'm heading, but I don't have, that exact end point that I want to get to. And so it kind of lets you enjoy the journey a little more, which is not always easy for me. So it helps.
That's great. That's great. I'm going to follow up with the group. What's something that we could all do to enjoy the journey a little bit more? Who wants to take that?
I loved personally what Kim was talking about being curious and failing forward. And I too, Callie, don't have a 5 or 10 year plan. So every role I've had has been, machete carving it out of the forest. But this idea of just kind of exploring and being curious about your gifts and talents is so interesting to me. And I think not limiting yourself and like the college students who didn't know what to do without a plan or without an objective, like that's really interesting to me, because we have this opportunity in our daily lives, in our work, to create, to make something out of nothing, to envision a future that we want to live in, to help brands and organizations hit their goals. And so I think in doing that, there's so much room for both and. For the planning and the preparation that comes with strategy, and for the wild, hairy, crazy, bold, audacious ideas that come from pie in the sky thinking. So what could be, and then how do we get there? And it takes us all to do that, because people have different right brain, left brain gifts and abilities to bring to the table. So use the people around you for good.
I love that. Yeah, it definitely takes a team, right? We are all gifted in the today, the now, and the future. And we all have a specific talent that we can be generous with and expand upon. Kim, the next question is for you. You talked about kind of integrating a routine about curiosity, and you spoke about kind of focusing on brain health. What would be some practical takeaways that our audience might want to take note of right now? Of like, what are some practical steps that maybe you've learned or that you've noted and that you want to start practically putting into your routine?
Well, I can share my list of supplements. That might be a good place to start. But aside from that, there's this trend of we're so overloaded that you need to learn to say no. But I think we just need to learn to say no to the things that aren't beneficial and to try and live a little bit more intentionally. And so I don't want to stop saying yes, because the yes is what fuels my curiosity. I mean, if you looked at my YouTube history, it's all over the place. You know, it's going to be anywhere. Well, I won't even go there. But anyhow, so I would encourage everyone to keep saying yes, but with intention. Is that?
I love that. That makes
fair?
sense.
Okay.
Make your yes powerful so that your no can be meaningful. Yeah, I love that. Okay, last question, and we'll open this up for the group. Janae, we're all communicators in different forms, fashions, and audiences. You talked about being tools, and we have different tools. And you've called me that before, and not in I'm just playing. What are some of the tools, the habits, moreover, that you would recommend for somebody that maybe in their early 20s? At 25, I didn't know anything. Maybe I knew a little bit about practical, but all the soft skills, all the things that I learned have been accumulating. And so if you want to be leveraged, if you want to be used, if you want to be a tool, what are some of the things that you would recommend? And I open this up to the group.
Okay, well, I've never called you a tool directly, ever. Not one time, except for just now from the stage when I addressed it to everyone. I think to specifically what Kim talked about, this idea of curiosity, I think that always being curious and like Brittany said, having childlike wonder, it's important through, your whole life. But I would say it's really, really, really important early on. There is a TED Talk that I share with my team. I've shared it with them multiple times. I've shared it with small groups I've led. It's called 10 Ways to Have a Better Conversation. And the point that the speaker ends on, she's an interviewer. You'd recognize her if you watch PBS at all. But she talks about where her mindset came from. And the interviewer, her background was actually her grandparents, her grandmother was this opera singer, and her grandfather, I don't know, did something important and interesting. All this to say, she said that there were always interesting people coming in and out of her life, people who were doing fascinating things in the arts or politics or business. And she just grew up thinking that literally everyone was an expert or a celebrity in something. She just needed to figure out what it was. And I think having that posture of curiosity, there is no experience you can have, no person you can meet, no obstacle you can come across, especially in your 20s, but I'd argue at all times, that can't teach you something, that you can't pull something from, even if it's in a season. Maybe you're in a job, you wouldn't be because you're here, you're in a great job, but let's say you're in a job that, isn't completely cut out for you. Well, you can still learn things from the people around you. Maybe it's in a person who has a different background from you. Maybe they're a different age. Maybe they're a different ethnicity. Maybe they're a different religion. Maybe they're from a different spot. You can learn something from them. If you look at every single person you come across, from the person you work next to, the lady who checks you out at the grocery store, the blind date you sit across, and you go, regardless of what comes from this, I can learn something I didn't know before from you. Nothing's wasted. Make it a habit.
I love that. Lifelong learner. Anybody else?
So good. Ask good questions.
That's great. Okay. Last question. I actually have one more follow-up, okay? So in the nature of being our first one spark, we've had one topic from each of you. We've had 5 speakers. What do we want to see more of? Our idea is for people to leave inspired or challenged and maybe ignited. What do we want to see more of? We're going to be collecting and curating more speakers and hopefully more impact. Open for the group. What do we want to see more of?
I'll answer this. I think that every single one of you has something interesting that you can share with me. I actually know this to be true because I've talked to all of you. Erica could tell us the best restaurant in any neighborhood, I don't know, within a 200-mile radius. I think that Kelly could show us, fashion trends, 2, 3, 4 years out from now and, tell us how to dress. I think that there is expertise and just untapped, interesting content among everybody. And I want to know what's going on inside their heads.
I love that. I love that. Everybody has value. Everybody has a gift, a time, a talent, something they can be generous with, something they can be curious about, and something that they can be excited for. So, with that, this concludes our One Spark. We're grateful for your time. We hope that you will leave ignited, challenged, passionate, and ready for the next opportunity. Thank you. Good night.